It's really nice to be here, everyone. My name is John Pepper. I'm the chair of the economics department, and I'm just going to say a few words to kick off the second day, the second Friday of the annual career forum. I want to begin by thanking Jen and the undergraduate steering committee and the chair of that committee, Caitlin Ackerman, for putting together really a terrific couple of days. I hope many of the students that are here were able to participate in the events last Friday. And now we have a really great day this Friday, beginning with this panel that you're all here to hear about today. At noon or 12:15, there's a case interview panel session, and then at 1:15 we have two simultaneous sessions, one on the legal profession and economists working in that sector, and the other is in tech. And so students are welcome to attend those events and take advantage of really this great opportunity. I mean, I find this event to be one of my favorites. I try to attend every session, at least for a half hour or so, because it's just so interesting to hear what people are doing, you know, and how they're doing and how they've proceeded throughout their careers from the point that students are at today. You know, many of you are here wondering what to major in, wondering what courses to take, wondering how you're going to get to the next step in your life. And it can be a very anxious moment. And then taking that moment and seeing how the alumni have proceeded from the point you're at to you know, very interesting and rewarding careers. So it's a great opportunity. I encourage students to take advantage of it and ask questions that will help you make some decisions about, you know, what major, you know, if you're thinking of at the point of deciding on a major, you know, help you think about that decision, but also think about, you know, your next steps in your life, which is exciting, but can be a little terrifying as well. Let me just, I don't want to talk. It's not really, you're not here to hear me, but I just want to encourage you, in addition to taking advantage of today, to take advantage of the ECO. It's really a unique opportunity in the college. For those of you who are majors, you know, it's the only kind of in-house career service program in the college, and it's a terrific opportunity for you. And lastly, I just want to thank our panelists here for the whole day, but the ones that are spending this hour with us: Kathleen, Stephanie, Grant, and Emily. Thanks for taking the time to share with us your experiences and help us, you know, think about what we're doing in our lives. So I think that's it. I'll pass it on to Chris, who is a member of the steering committee and will help you know, kind of get things underway. So thank you.
Thanks, Professor Pepper. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Grondin, and I am a third year majoring in economics here at UVA. I've been part of this forum's planning committee, and it's my great privilege to welcome you here today to the Economics Undergraduate Career Forum organized by the Economics Career Office. Thank you, Emily, Grant, Kathleen, and Stephanie, for spending your time with us today. We have so much to learn from you. But first, I'd like to recognize our Student Planning Committee, many of whom are here today, and Jen Jones, the Economics Career Office Director, for finding these fantastic alumni who are here today. This year's Planning Committee spent significant time imagining today's program, navigating the obstacles caused by the pandemic, and researching the backgrounds of our alumni, which led to us hosting this prestigious group here today. These panelists are also able to be reached after the panel during their individual office hour sessions, which will take place directly after this panel. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Professor Michael Moore. Professor Moore is an economist who publishes widely in applied microeconomics and has testified extensively in antitrust, consumer fraud, and product defect litigation, with an emphasis on class certification defenses. He also provides econometric consulting services to pharmaceutical and financial service companies. His academic career has included teaching roles at UVA in the economics department, Darden School of Business, and Batten School of Leadership and Public Policy, as well as Duke University, Northwestern University, and the University of Chicago. Interestingly, Professor Moore was consulted by Tom Brady's legal team in the famous case NFL v. Brady, also known as the Deflategate case. We hope you will enjoy this panel. The floor is yours, Professor Moore.
Thanks, Chris. As soon as you tell people that, that's all they want to talk about. So I guess I'll have a separate room to talk about Deflategate. So no, really, thanks, Chris and Jen and Eco folks and everyone for helping me out here. I told you the other day, I said, I love volunteering for things where somebody else does all the work. And that's certainly been the case here. So it's really been a great help. And you know, to all the students and prospective majors and so on, you know, you might be a little surprised to hear this, but I really am envious of where you are right now. I mean, to be starting out on this great adventure. And I tell all my friends, if I could rewind the tape and start over, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And so I wish you well on this, embarking on this great adventure. And yeah, just make sure you take advantage of all the help that people give you, the panelists here and your fellow alums and professors and so on and so forth. And just, you know, use your training, your significant training and your significant abilities, and you'll do fine. You know, one of the questions I always get from my students everywhere is, you know, having taught at all these other places, they say, well, how do we rate, you know, compared to these students at other institutions? And I honestly tell everyone that the UVA undergrads are as good or better than anyone I've seen anywhere else at any of these institutions. I mean, they're just really smart and respectful and hardworking and really well trained in economics. And you know, so you should be very happy about that. You really have a great treasure in your hands. And I know you'll get a lot out of it. One other thing I'll say is that, you know, I've been doing this for a really long time, like 45 years or so. And, you know, in graduate business schools and Ph.D. programs and MBA programs and undergrads. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that, you know, what's hot comes and goes in terms of jobs and careers and so on. And in the 80s, it was Wall Street. In the 90s, it was consulting. And then it was Silicon Valley. And then it was entrepreneurship. And now it's Silicon Valley and platform business. And these things, you know, they evolve over time. And student interest seems to follow them along. But, you know, the one great constant, I think, and the thing I tell students is economics is not a fad. I mean, it's there. And it works in every one of these things. And if you have the ability to think like an economist, I mean, you've got this really valuable option to do well and you know, whatever's out there in front of you, you know, at whatever point going forward. And I think it's really a remarkable thing. I don't think it's changed much since Marshall in the 19th century, and there's a reason for that. It's because it really works. And if you learn your economics, you'll be able to thrive in it. You know, the world isn't slowing down. So this will help you more and more. The value of that goes up more and more over time. So anyways, enough about my views. Let's tell the panelists, everyone who's in the room, if you want to identify yourself. Chris, you set up a way to do that, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me know when it's ready to go on.
So everybody can just type in the chat what your year and major is, just so that we can get a sense of who is attending this event. A lot of economics, anthropology, stats, biology, foreign affairs. Very cool. It looks like we've got some people from all years, which we love to see. Economics and Chinese. Wow. Okay. So now we can move into getting the intro from our panelists.
Okay, panelists, Emily, Grant, Kathleen, Stephanie, thanks for zooming in here and coming to Charlottesville digitally. Yes, I don't know if any of you are here physically, but I really appreciate you taking the time to come in. and share your experiences and your views with our students here. We've got some advanced questions that were sent to you. We'll open with those, and then after that, after suitable time, we'll go to a general Q&A, and there's some mechanism in place for students to meet with you individually afterwards, after our hour is up. Okay. So I'll start with, yes, go ahead.
I was just gonna kick off the introductions, if that's all right.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having us. My name is Emily. I graduated with an econ major in 2016, which both feels like it was yesterday and in a way feels like forever ago. But it's great to be here. It's really fun to get to reconnect back with Monroe Hall, even in this virtual setting. I always love events that bring me back to UVA and particularly to the econ department. And just as I was listening to the remarks up front, I mean, I think Professor Moore is right. Like to be in y'all's shoes is exciting. And I also know right now it's really difficult, and your college experience right now probably looks a lot different than what you might have anticipated a year ago. So just in light of all that, really excited to get to be here. Since UVA, I went to Boston Consulting Group, or BCG. They do strategic or management consulting. Was in the DC area for about 3 years, and I'm currently on a leave of absence to attend business school up at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. And I'll be returning to BCG back in the DC office when I graduate this summer.
Okay. So for starters, and anyone who wants to can start, a little review of your history, how what do you do, how'd you get there, where do you see yourself going from here, what can you tell the students about your personal history, your experiences?
Sure, I'm happy to start. I'm Kathleen Chandler. I'm a principal at Bates White, which is an economic consulting firm located in Washington, D.C. Our clients are primarily attorneys, either in private practice, at government agencies like the DOJ or FTC, or in-house at corporations. And our clients are involved in litigation, and they need an economist to provide an expert report, often estimating the damages at issue. So the experts would be someone like Professor Moore, potentially, or a partner who works at Bates White. I personally work.
Interrupt for 1 second.
Yeah.
I just will point out, I actually worked, I think I told you this, I worked with Bates White a couple of years ago on a big price fixing case, the packaged seafood antitrust litigation, and they did a fantastic job. So go ahead.
Appreciate the shout out. I was just going to talk about, I personally don't work on packaged seafood or antitrust much. I work primarily on behalf of life sciences and healthcare companies who are involved in fraud litigation, in which the government alleges that it paid too much for drugs and services that were administered to Medicare or Medicaid beneficiaries due to the company's alleged fraud. And a lot of those fraudulent practices involve pricing or marketing issues. So the teams that I work with often analyze Medicare or Medicaid claims data to try to evaluate potential damages, or often in the case of the defendants that I work on behalf of, the lack thereof, as well as what we call causation, meaning did the alleged fraud actually cause the claims that the government alleges are at issue to be submitted? So a little bit about my history. I started working at Bates White right after I graduated from UVA in 2008, and I've been working there ever since. I'm probably one of the rare people you'll meet who have only had one job and stayed there the entire time. I started as an entry-level consultant, primarily analyzing data. And now as a principal, I unfortunately spend a lot less of my time executing my own data analysis and a lot more of my time designing analyses, checking other people's work, managing teams, communicating results to clients, discussing case strategy with clients, and of course, trying to bring in more work from those clients. So that's a little bit about my kind of background and how I came to Bates White and what I do there.
I can,
or anyone?
Yeah, I can jump in. So my name's Grant. unlike the rest of this very experienced panel, I'm a class of 2020, so very recent grad, and happy to talk about what it's like to be a first-year analyst. Started my first year at Bain in October, which, like Emily talked about, BCG is another management consulting firm. Mostly have been in the private equity group over the last few months. So doing work for private equity clients that are considering purchasing a company. So looking at the market that the company plays in and thinking about whether it's an appealing market. What does it mean for the client to be in that line of business? As an undergrad, I also interned at Bain. So if you have any questions about the intern process or what that might look like, especially for the second years here, happy to speak to that. Yeah, I'm also in New York currently, which hopefully will be opening up soon. But yeah, I think otherwise also would echo what Emily said just about how great the resources are in the econ department at UVA. Always like being on these panels because things like this really helped me as an undergrad, and ECO actually helped me find the internship I had after my second year as an undergrad, and that was in private equity. And that was a great experience and sort of set me on the path that I'm on today. So shout out to the ECO for sure.
Who wants to go next? Stephanie?
I can go. Yes, I'm
Great.
back online. Sorry, I got kicked off my Wi-Fi. I'm Stephanie Demperio. I am an associate director at NERA Economic Consulting, based in Washington, D.C. Right now, if you can see, that's not Washington behind me. I'm visiting my mom in Florida, so enjoying some sunshine. But I am based in their D.C. office. My work sounds similar to Kathleen's. Except I think I have at least recently done more in the merger space than in litigation. My focus is almost entirely antitrust, though I do also do some work in the area of IP, intellectual property, and particularly at the intersection of those two. So in a very simple example would be that if there is an allegation that a patent gives you monopoly power, is the firm then abusing that monopoly power by extending that to other products through bundling or other tactics? And that's one example at the intersection of the two. My merger work has been most of my work in the past 2 years. And so that involves advising clients who are want to purchase a competitor or a non-competitor, maybe a supplier, that as to whether they can expect to have a potential review by the FTC or DOJ, and if there will be a review, to what extent that would be problematic and require divestitures of assets, quantifying those divestitures of assets and identifying those. Most recently, I worked on a failed merger between McGraw-Hill and Cengage. So all of you are students and you are the consumers in the market that we were concerned about your prices increasing. So I was actually working on behalf of the merging parties, but we let them know very early on this would be a tough one. And it turned out to be that the assets that would have had to be divested were too large for the deal to make any economic sense for the company. So they set it aside. I skipped over my background part. I actually did not go to UVA for undergrad. I went to UVA to get my PhD in economics. And my undergrad was at Colgate University in upstate New York. And then I worked at NERA for 2 years and then went to the UVA for my PhD in economics and went back to NERA after that. So I've got a tenure of 10 years at NERA, cumulative before and after, and some during grad school.
Stephanie, how much of the merger work on the cases I mean, I see it as, there's a big economics component and a big finance component, right? You
Right.
give merger simulations and all sort of stuff, and very sort of high level economic analyses. And then you have a lot of, more, what I would say more finance and accounting, balance sheet, income statement type review and valuations.
Yep.
What's your take on the importance of those? And
our role has typically been on the more economic antitrust side of things, and less on the financial side. Although the economic side, in the divestiture example that I gave, we would tell them like, these are the assets that you would have to sell off, and so, or likely have to sell off, or this is what the Department of Justice is demanding. So then we would advise the business and they could make a decision as to whether or not it's worth it to go through with the deal. And a lot of our involvement is early on, like before a deal is signed, to give them a sense of what it will look like going forward. But the analyses that we're doing on the antitrust side are much more economic arguments. And on the merger space, I've actually seen that we can, because we're interfacing with economists at the DOJ instead of a judge or a jury in litigation, we can do a lot more economics and econometrics than we could get away with in litigation, because our audience are other economists.
I could relate to that.
Yes.
I had a judge once refer to my analysis as argle-bargle. I don't know what that means, but I don't think he liked it. Okay, great. Emily?
Oh, I kicked us off. Is there anything you'd like me to add?
I'm sorry. Okay. Did you say much more about, anything more you can add about what you do and where you're going in the future? And
where I'm going in the future, I'm not sure. Your guess is as good as mine. In terms of management consulting, and that's part of the beauty of it, is that it really does allow you to get to explore a wide variety of both industries as well as functional areas. So management consulting, you're often going to be, you'll be staffed on a project for anywhere between 3 months and a year. The project lengths really do vary. They can be all over. So I've worked for the public sector, done some government work. I've worked for big healthcare companies. I've worked for industrial goods companies, tech companies, really all across the board. And that's part of what I enjoy about the job, is that it's never the same from day to day. And the skill sets that you build while you're there, which certainly build on all of the critical thinking and analytical skills that you're developing right now in the econ department, those skills just continue to grow. And I think in particular, management consulting focuses a lot on client relationship building and on some of those interpersonal and problem solving skill sets. Those continue to grow, and you're constantly getting to apply them in different settings and in different scenarios. So that's part of what I've loved about the job. In addition, it's very team focused. You're always working as part of a team as opposed to, just as an individual. And that certainly keeps it interesting and keeps it fun and keeps the work sustainable as well. So I guess that's kind of where I'll leave it for now for just what I've enjoyed about the job. No such thing as kind of sometimes I get asked, well, what does a day in the life look like? And totally depends on the day. So anyways, in terms of where I'm going, I feel like just like for you all right now with these incredible skills in economics and all these doors that are going to be open to you, that's how I think I'll feel coming out of management consulting. I'm in no rush to leave. I've loved BCG. I'm looking forward to going back after business school. But I don't think I'll be there forever either. And I don't know what'll be next.
And what motivated the decision to get an MBA? I mean, that's not everyone does that, right?
Certainly not. It was a couple things. For one, I missed school a lot, and it was really exciting to get to be back in the classroom. A second reason is I'm actually pursuing a dual degree. I'm doing my MBA. I'm also doing my master's in education, and that's been something I've wanted to do for a long time. And even while I was at UVA, I thought about trying to do something with the Curry School and kind of formalize my training in education. It's always been an interest of mine, but I never really acted on it. And so Morton and Penn has a great dual degree program that attracted me. And I think the final reason, and I know this is true of Grant's firm as well, and I'm sure of others out there, but one really nice thing about going into some of these firms after undergrad is the opportunities that they try to open up for you kind of a few years in. And so BCG is actually sponsoring my return back to graduate school, which was really nice from a financial perspective because it is expensive, at least MBA programs. I know it's different for different graduate programs, but anyway, so having the opportunity to have my employer pay for it, to go back, kind of be back in the classroom, get that education degree as well. It felt like a really good opportunity.
Yeah, and you know, the requirements change. It's good to sometimes you have to go back and learn about it. So,
Yep.
and I'm interested to hear everyone's thoughts on the panel about, you know, there's your economics skills and your economics training, and there are economics jobs, you know, like you know, litigation consulting, but more economics as a skill, thinking like an economist, that as a skill compared to other skills like, you know, can you program in R and do you know Stata? And I mean, a lot. My own experience in the private sector is that those more, I would call them mechanical skills, programming and so on and so forth, are a lot more important when you start out, and that you really start to use your economics as you move up to more senior positions. Is that an accurate assessment? That the relative importance of economics, it just gets more and more important as you go along.
Yeah, I would
be
say
happy to-
definitely. I think having an economics background helps you just establish those analytical skills and maybe be conversant in econometrics and statistics.
Mhm.
But a lot of the work we do, you know, especially work that's not deeply IO and antitrust related, and, you know, work that you might be doing as an entry-level consultant really doesn't require formal economics training. We just really need folks with good quantitative skills, a good head on their shoulders, an aptitude for working with data, someone who's going to work hard and really, you know, apply themselves to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you
And
get
I-
really like at the strategy level, right, and you're running the company, then you really need to be able to think about that in
Yeah.
a coherent way. So, Stephanie or Grant, anything to add?
Yeah, I would add that in the consulting space, while we definitely at the researcher, we call our RAs researchers, at the researcher level, we are, you know, quantitative experience is very important. The ability to code, the ability to do data analysis, but it's not enough to really be a great researcher. You have to really, like, especially in antitrust, there's a lot of qualitative work that goes along with the quantitative work, and you have to understand the sort of economic, what are the incentives, what are the economics that are going on behind the scenes, because those frame your questions, the high level questions. And I'm always encouraging my team to, like, you know, get out of the weeds a little bit, think big picture, step away a little bit, and think about the higher level economic arguments we're trying to make. Because you could code something, you know, I've had cases where people have coded something perfectly and somehow market shares end up over 100%. And, like, that's just not possible. So it's like, what happened? Some assumption is wrong in your data. But, you know, if you're not, that's a very obvious example, but things like that happen, and you have to think, do my results make any sense? And, you know, do those sanity checks. And even at the researcher level, that's incredibly important. And then as you get higher up, a lot of times you're not touching the data as much. I don't get to do a lot of the hands-on data analysis anymore, but I have to know the right questions to ask. have to know the right, where to look for potential issues. And that comes, again, through that economic way of thinking. And so I think it's incredibly important. And I would agree it becomes more important, but I think it's incredibly important even at the entry level, because that's going to make you so much more valuable to your firm.
My own experience when I work with the litigation groups is I really rely on everybody on the team, from entry level up to the partners, to, you know, if something's not right or they disagree, look me in the eye and say so. I mean, I'm not not going to be 100% right all the time, but you know, the work's got to be perfect, and it takes everybody, you know, looking each other in the eye and saying, wait a second, that doesn't make sense. And that can come from anywhere. And then the other, I mean, I also rely very heavily on younger people being more up to speed on the current literature and techniques than I am. And, you know, that can come from a person who's been on the job for 2 months. But, you know, I can't keep up with all this stuff anymore. And so it's really, that's really, in my own world, that's very crucial. Grant?
Yeah, I would echo that and what Stephanie said. Definitely, I think the best part of my job as an associate so far is that if I get asked to tell what the size of the market is or give a number, that's not really what I'm being asked for. It's what does this mean for the answer? What does this mean for the client? What does this mean for the project? So having that soft sort of understanding of how a market model works, just every class you take in economics, the problems you do might seem like I wouldn't do this problem exactly in the real world, and that's probably true. But the models that you use in those classes are the same sort of frameworks and thinking that ends up being applied and helps me understand what's going on. And instead of going to my manager and saying the answer is 10, my manager will say, okay, like, so what? And having that so what answer is actually how I look like a good associate, not having the 10 part. So
it all becomes clear why you learned all that stuff. I have one more question, and Emily, you can answer, anyone really. I think that if you've been out for a few years, maybe you have a little bigger sample to draw on, but what was your favorite job you worked on, and what did you like about it?
So for me personally, and when I hear that question, my mind goes to kind of my favorite case and my favorite project.
Yeah.
And it was the one I did right before actually going to business school, and it was a longer case for me. It was in the healthcare space, and without going into it's a company that y'all have all heard of, and it's what I was doing was working on some of their IT systems, and work that, to be honest, like day one on the case, I'm like, this is just dry as dirt. Like, you know, I think I like the team, the client seems neat, but like, oh my gosh, cutting these costs on these IT systems as you're merging, you know, and how is this relevant to, for instance, what I learned in an econ major, and what have I signed up for? And it was a really incredible case. And I think just drawing back to some of what my fellow panelists were talking about with the last question, what I carried with me from my econ degree and from a liberal arts education in general, I think, is just an ability to problem solve creatively in a way that involves numbers and that involves people, and can actually kind of merge the two together. And where this case got really interesting was you kind of had the IT folks on one side, you know, who felt really strongly about the direction that this company needed to go. And then you had the quote unquote business folks who felt like any change to the IT system was just going to completely mess up their business. And I kind of found myself in the middle of that, trying to be a bridge between these two different, you know, these client groups who are on the same team, part of the same company, ultimately want the same thing, but are seeing things through a very different lens. And I loved that role of really being able to understand both sides, being able to translate from one to the other. I think something that economists have to do, and I think sometimes do really well and other times struggle to do, is take really technical problems and put them in terms that are intuitive to people and that people can understand. And I know many of my professors at UVA were really excellent at doing that. And that's kind of the role I found myself in, of taking these technical problems, translating them into based on the priorities of the quote unquote business folks. And anyway, the outcome of the project was really successful. I had a great team doing it along with me, and that's probably been my favorite experience so far.
Okay. Anyone else? It seems, Grant, you want to add anything, or we could move on to the individual Q&A. Either it's your call.
Speak to it super briefly, but definitely have been on, I guess, 4 full projects so far. So of those 4, Definitely the most exciting one was, as an intern, our client was diligencing a public retail chain, which a lot of you have probably shopped at. I had shopped at, and trying to understand, because retail has been struggling, trying to understand where that business was going, and all that work as an intern, and being involved in part of a decision that was going to be really important for the client, and ultimately seeing our work help kill the deal and help them decide not to make the investment was just a pretty cool experience as a 21-year-old.
Well, I'll tell you mine. Y'all know what it was. Is working on the Deflategate case, and I'll share one thing with you. One anecdote. We had a 13-hour hearing at NFL headquarters, and I was in the breakout room, and Tom Brady came in, and he said, you know, they're all lawyers and NFL officials and so on there, but there's just Tom and myself in the room, and he said, boy, I don't know how you guys do all that stuff with all those math and equations and graphs and stuff. He said, my job's easy. I just have to throw a football. And I just looked at him. I said, Tom, you never saw me try to throw a football. He said, well, okay, I get your point. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. You know, not the same scale as a lot of the other ones, but, you know, a memory forever. And, you know, you'll all get those memories forever as you go through. I wish you all well, and I'll turn it over now to Chris via Zoom chat if you want to field individual questions. Go ahead, and thanks again, everyone, very much for your time.
Okay, so we're moving on to student Q&A. I've gotten a few good ones from the audience, but like Professor Moore just said, just please send them directly to me via Zoom. And our first question, I'm going to roll up to one from Joseph and one from Tasneem. 2 parts. First, looking back on your own second or third year, what is one thing you're really glad you did, or one thing that you really wish you did? And second, and on basically the same note, is there anything you wish you had known about the world of work during your time at UVA? And this is for everyone on the panel.
I'll go. So with the caveat that my second and third year were not at UVA, but so coming from the same perspective, I will say in terms of coursework, and this might actually be flipped for UVA students, but in terms of coursework for me at Colgate, the economics major did not require some of the quantitative stuff because it was a liberal arts college. So taking the more quantitative courses was something that really helped frame my ability to advance going forward. From the other angle, I would say, and this hits the second question, from the other angle, I would say, if you are really good at the quantitative stuff, make sure you take some of the liberal arts courses, a lot of writing, because the thing that I wish I had known was how important communication is for all of these jobs. You're, as Emily talked about, you're going to be working with a team. You need to be able to communicate with your team. You need to be able to communicate with your clients verbally and in writing and in emails, and not just presenting your results, but like, this is, you know, this is the portion of the project I'm going to take on. This is what the task is. And like every bit of our jobs involves so much communication that I didn't, you know, I think I undervalued that at the time. And so those soft skills should not be ignored. Like the quantitative abilities are necessary, but they're not sufficient.
Yeah, so I think I would advise students to, you know, maybe focus less on specific courses or formal training and focus more while they're in college on getting some real world experience, you know, working with data, for instance, through a research assistant position on in-class projects or in internships, you know, even an RA position where you're kind of routinely downloading PDFs and manually entering data in a spreadsheet, you know, sounds really boring, but it can help you become familiar with how to navigate Excel and even how to use keyboard shortcuts and become nimbler with the data. And frankly, you just know the data firsthand, and you can probably predict how a graph would look and what that regression might show, even if you know, it's not your role or your task to actually make the graph or run the regression.
I think the best thing I did was serve as an undergraduate teaching fellow or TA, I don't know what they're calling it these days, for Professors Elzinga and Professor Kopic. That was, I don't know if any of y'all are doing that or considering doing that. Fantastic experience all around, and really made me appreciate, to Stephanie's point, the value of communication and particularly of explaining concepts to students in multiple ways, because people think differently. And when I apply that to my job in consulting, like that's what I would fall back on as kind of the single thing I probably learned the most from and use every single day, because it's all about, like I was saying earlier, kind of translating concepts into ways that are really going to resonate with people.
I think you will hear this from a lot of people, but and you've sort of heard it already, but your undergraduate years are the best time for just trying out new things. And there's probably a lot of areas of study or clubs or hobbies that you might not just try if you're so zeroed in on completing just an econ degree or just getting a job in X, Y, or Z. And I think that I definitely tried a decent amount of different things as an undergraduate, but definitely embracing that to the extent that you don't just zero in on doing a very set career path. Like every club is, you know, a career club for your finance job or your consulting job, but you try things outside of your core sphere. You'll find when you have a job, you know, your extracurriculars are not going to be a finance club. When you're working in finance, your extracurriculars are going to be the hobbies and interests you've cultivated, you know, throughout your whole life, but also throughout your undergraduate degree. And I think that even when thinking about, you know, getting a job, if I talk to two people that have like very similar career interests, but one of them can also just talk about their life outside of their work, that person is just a lot more interesting and fun to talk to and exciting to work with. So I think to the extent that you have opportunities to take advantage of all the things that UVA has outside of very like career focused things, those are, you know, pretty unique opportunity.
A lot of great points made by everyone. I have a quick follow-up. So Stephanie and some others focused on communication skills in their answer, and I think that's great. But for students going into sort of a resume drop or an interview, they might feel that it's difficult to convey good communication skills without having an opportunity to have a long form conversation. So the question is, how do you demonstrate to employers that you have communication skills, maybe on a resume?
I would say don't underestimate your cover letters. We read those, and if you have, you know, just something that's generic and just like a form that tells you nothing, that doesn't help. If you have errors or grammatical errors or typos, that also just doesn't set a good example. And if you can convey even in a paragraph who you are, why you're interested, and why you'd be a good fit, if you can convey that well in your written cover letter, that does give us a signal about your communication abilities.
Please don't tell me you're interested in an analyst position in our New York office, because we don't have an analyst position and we don't have a New York office. So do what we call quality control, QC, your cover letters. And also, like Stephanie said, just make sure they're well written, you know, hopefully written for that specific job, using proper spelling and language. A little bit of effort goes a long way.
And Chris, your question around the resume specifically, I think of this as being one of the skills you want to show as opposed to tell. Like, probably don't want to see on your resume that you have a bullet that says great communication skills. I think what I would rather see is that you've written your resume in a concise and impactful way, and your cover letter, just as Kathleen and Stephanie were saying. And also that in a you know, I know we're having these office hours, which are super low pressure, ask anything you want, but think about if these were like coffee chats with employers, and kind of, how are you presenting yourself? How's your first impression coming across? I think that those small signals, when combined with a strong resume, strong cover letter, do go a long ways, and certainly are going to go further than a bullet point on great communication. Now, that's different if you've been heavily involved in debate or in, you know, something that really is worth putting on a resume, please do. But I would, again, err towards showing as opposed to telling.
Great answers, very little to add, but I think that one thing that makes a cover letter really good is having actually spoken with people at the company and gotten an understanding of what they really do there, because then you can actually explain why you actually want to work there and make a much more compelling case for yourself.
Okay, another question, and for this time we'll go in the opposite order, and we'll start with Grant. In a non-COVID scenario, could you all just walk us through sort of a regular day or an example of a day, if all of your days are different, and just tell us your favorite part of the job?
Definitely days are very variable, as has been mentioned, but the normal cadence is, you know, morning check-in with your team at 9:30, make sure everyone's aligned for the day on what's coming through. Throughout the day, working on finding the answer, data analysis, you know, constructing parts of the presentation for the client to explain what we've done. Check-ins, you know, across teams, make sure we're all on the same page. Sounds very dry when you describe it like this, but I think the fun part all the way along the way is, you know, every time, whether you're talking with people on your team or you're working alone, there is an open question that you're trying to answer, and that answer really matters. And so being constantly thinking about that answer and working towards that answer is the best part of the job. And then usually in the evening, you know, around 4:30, check back in with the team, like align about what we've been seeing throughout the day, and, you know, wrap up some work in the evening. But I think that cadence is pretty consistent regardless of the project, as far as checking in with the bigger team, working on the answer on your own, and returning back to the team.
I would add just a couple of things to Grant's answer, which one would be that travel is a component in management and strategy consulting. So that's something to consider if you're looking into these jobs. Now, there's definitely a range there. And some of my friends absolutely loved travel and were jet setting all the time, of course, in pre-COVID days. I found it kind of exhausting and actually tried to do cases a little closer to home. So there's some personal preference that can go into that. The other thing I would just add to Grant's is, in addition to checking in and aligning with your team, there's a lot of doing that with clients as well, just because they are your major stakeholder, and depending on the project. I mean, I've had cases where I'm literally working side by side with them, like they are, you know, 2 feet away from me, basically sharing a cubicle, and other cases where the client is a bit more removed, a bit more distant. So certainly some variation there, and overall would agree with everything that Grant said.
So I guess as one of the, I could say I'm more experienced or more tenured, but really I'm just old. So one of the older folks on the panel, you know, my days are a lot less actually like doing my own work and reporting what I found, and more of reviewing other people's work, kind of trying to understand what they've done, and, you know, checking to make sure it's accurate. In litigation, we have to make sure that our work is, you know, very accurate and correct, because if we don't, the other side will, and the expert could potentially receive what's called a Daubert motion and get his opinion potentially thrown out. And so we obviously don't want that. So we do a lot of what we call quality control and QC which sounds really tedious and boring, but I think it, helps keep our work really, holds our work to a high standard. I also spend a lot more of my time kind of thinking about, well, what analyses should we be running, given the questions that are at issue in the case and the allegations, and what our client may be able to argue based on the other facts and evidence. And then presenting the results of our analyses to clients and, getting their feedback and their reactions and proposing next steps. And, thinking about the broader case strategy. And then, of course, you do all of that, and then the client calls and asks a question out of the blue, and you have to think about it really quickly and marshal the team to answer that late night request. But it's not always late night, but it could happen at any time. So there's a lot of client requests in litigation that come up, at arbitrary times that you can't necessarily predict. So every day really is different whether you like it or not.
I guess I will, also I guess being old, I'm sort of in the same role as Kathleen. I'll echo a lot of what she said in terms of my day-to-day. I'll give an example of a merger review as a little bit different than my litigation type tasks and day-to-day there. So we might, I'd be supervising analysis to make a specific economic argument in favor of the deals. For example, looking at diversion between the two competitors and showing that the customers are not close, choosing between the competitors very often or switching between those two competitors very often. So we might spend weeks, maybe months, doing a bunch of analyses to show that using econometrics and other techniques, and we would prepare those, and I would not be the one preparing them. I would be supervising the analysis and reviewing the results at this stage of my career. But the research staff, all of you potentially, would be the ones doing those analyses. And then I would present those results to my clients and consider how strategically helpful they would be to present to the DOJ. Following that, I would then actually, pre-COVID, go to the DOJ and attend meetings with the economists and lawyers at the Department of Justice, present those results, get their feedback. They might say, but what about this subset of customers? And it might be a subset that we hadn't considered. And so we would have to go back and rerun our analyses in looking at a specific segment of the market. So post-meeting, I would then talk to my clients, the lawyers, about next steps, and then I would meet with my team of research analysts and talk about the next set of modeling and econometrics and other analyses that we would do to address the DOJ specific questions. So it's different than litigation in that it's not kind of a one-shot thing. You don't make all of your arguments at once. And you present something, you get feedback, and then you present some more and you get feedback. So during a merger review, I was speaking with the economist at the DOJ about once a week. And so there's a lot of repeated interaction, which made it pretty interesting, but also very stressful. So that's kind of the flip side to a lot of what I've realized in consulting is when I think about my favorite cases, they weren't always my favorite in the moment because the most exciting and interesting ones have been also there's a lot of time pressure and stress that comes with that too. And I think that's pretty standard across consulting, but I'll let the others correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Great. So we have one final question, and I think that this is a really good one coming from Brian from our steering committee. First, why, when you were coming out of school, or whichever stage it was, did you feel that consulting was right for you? And what were sort of the factors that led you to consulting? And then as a second question, just to tie it in with the present day, it's separate, but if you want to address it, you can. How has COVID impacted your industry and your work?
I can start. I just say when I was interviewing for jobs in my fourth year, I didn't really understand that there were different types of consulting. And so I cast a really wide net and basically applied to any job that said consulting in the title. And you all obviously are at an advantage here because you already understand there are different types. So I had a lot of interviews with different management consulting firms and litigation and economic consulting firms, and gradually kind of came to the understanding of what they all did, what the differences were, and just felt that economic consulting was better suited to my interests and skills. So I really like that economic consulting is more quantitative in nature. We're working with data on a daily basis. Like I said, our analyses are held to really high standards. So we're doing very technical analyses and have to make sure they're correct. I also kind of like the competitive aspect of litigation consulting. So we're, fighting for our side with kind of data and evidence as our weapons of choice. I like to use the metaphor that we're intellectual gladiators. I find it really satisfying when I can see the impact of my work directly. So when I was a consultant, I can see the graph that I made in the expert report and then flashed up on the screen, if that case goes to trial. I can see the, ticker on the bottom of the news that the company I, worked for, just settled for a huge amount of money, even though that amount of money was much less than what it could have been thanks to our, good work. So those are the things that really attracted me to economic consulting and the things that have kept me there. And then in terms of COVID, I think, it's just made everyone be better, have to work harder to communicate because we're not all sitting in the same room. When we're in the office, we have what we call war rooms where case teams will sit together, especially leading up to a deadline, so that you can easily ask someone else next to you, like, okay, what are you assuming in your data analysis? Is that is consistent with what I'm assuming over here? That sort of thing. You can't do that. And so you just have to be more creative about keeping in touch with folks. I think it's actually made our interactions with clients maybe a little bit better because you just get to know people on a closer level when you're seeing the crib in the back of their room and that sort of thing. As opposed to just always being on regular phone calls without any video or in-person meetings, which were kind of our interactions before. So that's been an unexpectedly nice aspect of it from a business perspective.
Okay, I think Chris, it's time to thank everyone. Thank the panelists again for your time and your thoughts.
Yeah. So thank you to our panelists for your time, and thank you to the students for joining. And as Kathleen said in that latest answer, you do get to see the two different brands of consulting in this panel, and I think that's great for students. So to wrap up, thank you, Professor Moore. Thank you, everybody, for attending. And if you are signed up for office hours, you can leave the call and rejoin at your assigned time. If you want to be on the wait list for office hours in case a spot opens up for any of these for alumni, you can go to the link that Zuha just put in Zoom. And other than that, thank you all for attending the panel.